Okay. And then again, the Year of Learning sponsorships is Dr. Paul Konigsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Konigsberg. Ed Goldberg, in memory of his cousin, Nissim Hara. Paul and Bob Romberg, in memory of their dear friend, Julian Smith. Malcolm Mann, in memory of the many of her family murdered in the Holocaust. The many friends of Dr. Mervyn Blush. The friends of Toby Paris. The friends of Malka Levy. The friends of Avi Gittler. Sheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of their uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook. Marsha Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush. Charles Galfinsky, A Month of Learning in memory of his mother. Gila and Harold Salzman in memory of her mother. Chaim and Phyllis Reese in memory of his father. And Phyllis and Chaim Reese in memory of her father. Then the Day of Learnings are sponsored by Rabbi Moshe Kranzler in memory of his father-in-law, and also Sheryl and Ted Spar in memory of her mother, and also Ted and Sheryl Spar in memory of his mother. May all the neshamot have an aliyah. Okay, so we're going to begin today with looking at Chanukah. I've decided to dedicate 3 classes to the Chanukah thing because basically next week I'll finish all the laws, all the prayers of Chanukah, just before Chanukah, because next week is going to be the first night of Chanukah. But I also wanted to focus on Hallel, which I haven't had a chance to do for any of the other holidays, and so I wanted to focus on that. So even though it'll be Rosh Chodesh, probably before we get to focus properly on Hallel, at least by the next Rosh Chodesh, you'll have Hallel sort of covered. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen with you of basically the prayers that we do on Chanukah, and if you look, you'll see that on Chanukah, basically there's a lot of things that we actually add to our tefillot. So first of all, the first thing that will begin is on Ma'ariv of the evening service, on which this year will be on December the 10th. The first thing we will do is in the Amida and Ma'ariv, we will add the Al Hanisim and the B'mei Matityahu. So that's the paragraph that we'll add, which is in 274 and 276 in the Art Scroll, and the Quran 273. Then immediately after Ma'ariv, it is required that as soon as possible you light the candles. And when you light the candles, they say it's preferable to do it as soon as the stars come out and gets dark. So you have 3 sections to lighting the candles. Again, 3 sets of tefillot that we say. Oops, look at my first spelling mistake over there. I can see I've got Mapsur instead of Mausur. Anyway, brachot, blessings on 782, the Hanerot Halalu, these lights, and then the Ma'osur, which is on 782 to 784. So that's what we do for the lighting of the candles, and we'll talk more about that later today. Then on Shacharit morning, you're going to do the Al Hanisim again in your morning Amida, and then you're going to add Hallel after the Amida, and then there's going to be a Kriyat HaTorah. So even though the first day of Chanukah will be on a Friday, which we don't normally do the Torah reading, on the whole of Chanukah we say for 8 days the Torah reading, which we'll discuss as well next week's class. And then the important thing also is in the morning service, we're going to leave out the prayer Lamanatzeach for the conductor, which is on page 152 in the Art Scroll and 173 in the Quran. And we don't say that for the entire part of Chanukah, just like we don't say that on any of the other Chagim or holidays that we have. Then in Mincha in the afternoon service, again, you say the Al Hanisim that we're going to discuss today, which is on 244 to 246. And again, if you are saying Birkat Hamazon at any time, you also say the Al Hanisim. So what's important really, I guess, is to start off by discussing the Al Hanisim prayer, and that's what I'm going to begin with today. Okay, any questions on that? As I say, that will be in the handout that will get posted today anyway, so you'll have it definitely by next week. Okay, so we're going to start in the art scroll on page 274 to 276. That's what we're going to start with. And seeing as I've got Cherna online, she can do my reading for me. Can you want to read the page 275? Let's start just with that section on the bottom in the gray, where it says on Chanukah.
Where it says
275.
at the bottom of the bottom.
Very bottom, yeah.
And for the miracles, and for the salvation, and for the mighty deeds, and for the victories, and for the battles which you performed for our forefathers in those days at this time.
Okay, and then if you turn over the next page on the,
all right,
it'll be on your left-hand side for Chanukah.
In the days of Matisyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hashmonaim and his sons, when the wicked Greek kingdom rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and compel them to stray from the statutes of your will, you in your great mercy stood up for them in the time of their distress. You took up their grievances, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton into the hands of the diligent students of your Torah. For yourself you made a great and holy name in your world, and for your people Israel you worked a great victory and salvation as this very day. Thereafter, your children came to the Holy of Holies of your house, cleansed your temple, purified the site of your holiness, and kindled lights in the courtyards of your sanctuary. And they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanks and praise to your great name.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so basically that is the Al Hanisim that you will be adding in all the Amidot once Chanukah starts and in your benching. Now, this is a declaration basically of the thanks for the miracle of Chanukah. And it is the main addition that we add to our Tefillot, as I said, in the Amidah, and also in Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals. In the Amidah, where would we think that we would include such a section? Well, when we look at what we're saying, basically we're giving thanks to Hashem. So clearly the second last section of the Amidah, which is the Hoda'ah, remember if you look back on page 275 at the bottom, the Modim and the Thanksgiving, the Hoda'ah, that's the Hoda'ah section. We included over there after we've done Modim and we've thanked Hashem like we normally do every single day. So we add in these extra thanks. And then again, we concluded with eventually the bracha of the Hoda'ah section later, which will be Hatov Shemcha L'chana et Lehodot, which will be, we give you thanks, that is fitting to give thanks. So that's one of the reasons we included there. Similarly, if you look in the Birkat HaMazon, which we'll look a little bit next week, but it's also included in the section in the Birkat HaMazon where we give thanks to Hashem for different things. So that's the reason why the sages decided to choose that. Now, as you can see, if you look back at the reading, you'll see that the vav, okay, in the Hebrew, and the word and in the English is in parentheses. Okay, so basically, the reason is that because we are continuing from the Modim to say thanks, we are now adding in. So there's certain commentaries that say you basically can by putting in the vav, you can basically adding on by saying and also thanks for this as well. So Rav Mang says, however, that this theoretically is a completely separate paragraph. And because of the way it's enclosed in the Modim, between the Modim paragraph and then later on the bracha of the Modim section, he thinks it's not necessary to add the vav. But of course, again, it's one of those things that you have to have the shiloh of your community. And whatever is done in your community, That's what you need to follow. However, Rav Monk actually says, though, however, when you do this in Birkat Hamazon, then you do say the Vav, because of the fact that you are actually not saying it as a separate paragraph, but it's part of that paragraph, and there's no section afterwards that is concluding with that paragraph. So that's just an interesting way to look at whether you say the and or not. Now, the important thing, Rabbi Sachs explains, is that the prayer is actually structured in two parts. So the first part we saw was on page 275, which is the Al Hanisim, which is where we thank Hashem for the miracles. And the second part is the next page, where it tells us about what happened, actually the story of what happened at Chanukah. So now the first part, as I said, is just a general introduction. And basically it just reflects our national gratitude to Hashem for performing miracles for us. And basically at all different key points of our history and enabling us to survive. And that's why that prayer actually often doubles, not just for Chanukah, but also for Purim. And we actually say it also then for Purim. So that section happens to be the same. Now, if we actually look at that prayer specifically, we see that there was actually a battle between the Chashmonaim and between the Greeks, right? So one of the reasons we mention the word salvation is because obviously if we look at the English for it says for the salvation, clearly the salvation was the fact that Hashem basically saved us from the Greeks. And similarly, because as we already know, it was a victory of the weak over the strong. But the most important thing was that the salvation that Hashem gave us was actually the salvation of our spirit. Eliyahu Kitov says that that's what we're saying when we say the salvation of the spirit. For the mighty deeds, obviously, we talk about the fact that it was helping the weak survive over the strong. And for the victories, the same thing, the fact that the few beat the many. And secondly, and with the battles, that's the same. And that's basically what we're talking about there. But with the miracle, what we're talking about when we mention the miracle is actually the fact that the oil burned for 8 days. And we'll discuss that a little bit further when we talk about why that. So it's important that we understand that each of those words actually for Chanukah's purposes mean different things. And in the story of Purim, they would mean different things when we discuss that next year. So that's the first part. All right. If you look at the very last words of the first part, and you see it says, in Hebrew, it says Bazman Hazeh. And in English, the translation is at this time. There's some people that translate it in the season. So there's a bit of a machloket again about that. But again, what the RCA says that the reason we are actually saying Bazman Hazeh is to think of it as this time. And that's why they use the translation this time, because of the fact that we still do have miracles that Hashem, that maybe are hidden miracles that Hashem performs every single day, basically to preserve us in life, and also to keep our nation, the Jewish people, alive and still existing after all these many, many years of people trying to destroy us. So even though we're talking about the miracle of the time of Chanukah, we're also thanking Hashem of the miracle of this time, and hence the words Bazman Hazeh, Zman meaning this time, and actually the time that we're saying the bracha as well. We're also thanking him for those things. Okay, so now we're going to progress into the second part of the saying. So the first thing that we get is we get a little bit of a history lesson about exactly what happened, and that it was in the days of Mattityahu. Okay, so Mattityahu at that stage was the son of Yochanan. Yochanan had already passed away by this stage, even though he had continued to tell his son Mattityahu that he needed to continue the struggle against the Greeks, even though he wasn't able to be successful to bring about a change. And basically, Mattityahu had his 5 sons, who were Shimon, and he was the oldest, and Yehuda HaMaccabee, who basically is the person that, remember, led the undermanned and valiant Jewish army. And then there was Elazar, and then there was a Yochanan. Clearly, obviously, Mattityahu had a son named after his father, Yochanan. And there was also a Yonatan. So with the 5 sons of Mattityahu that they refer to here as the Chashmonaim, were the high priests at the time in Judea. And basically, the Greeks were at the time, as it says there, trying to make the people forget your Torah and compel you to stray from the statutes of the law. So when we read this, we see that basically the Greeks knew that the key to the Jewish religion was the keeping of the Torah and the Torah study. So they basically realized they didn't have to really try to convert the Jews. All they had to try to do was get them to neglect Torah study and to get them to stay away from Torah study. And as a result, that would be the thing that would make them stray away from doing mitzvot, and therefore they would turn away from observance, and there would be a deterioration of the observance. So basically, that's what Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch says the Greeks concentrated on first. Instead of trying to attract Jews to their religion, their Hellenistic ideas, in the beginning, they just tried to detract them from studying and forgetting the Torah, and basically thereby causing a deterioration of observance. Also, so as it's mentioned very many times in the Torah, we've read this and we've referred to this very often. We've talked about this when we're doing Teshuvah. There's a verse in Deuteronomy in Dvarim in chapter 14, verse 29, where it says, Hashem will bless you in all that you do. So we have discussed that means that whenever we try to do something good, Hashem will help us to do something good and to help us on the right path. So basically, this is exactly what Rabbi Twersky explains was the motivation factor with the Chashmonaim, and specifically with the Maccabees, Judah HaMaccabee, is that they decided that they were going to pay attention to the verse from Ethics of Our Fathers. Okay, so there's a verse in Ethics of Our Fathers, which is chapter 2, verse 21, that says in Hebrew, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata v'nchorin lehibatel mimena, which says that you are not required to complete the task, yet you are not free to withdraw from it. And that was the motivation between Yehuda HaMaccabee and the Chashmonaim to decide that they were going to actually try and stop the Greeks from doing this. And that's exactly what they did. And basically, as a result, they initiated the battle of the Maccabees. And as it says in the next part of the Tefillah, it was then brought to completion by Hashem, who basically supported them in their trust, and they believed that God would help them and God would bless them based on the verse from Devarim. And so therefore they were going to be blessed with success. So if you read that verse that said, and you in your great mercy stood up for them in the time of their distress, you took up their grievance, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. That was when Hashem decided that once they showed that they were not going to abstain from trying to help and stop what was going on with the Jews in Judea at the time, so they were going to basically start making sure that they would rise up and they would do that. And as a result, they knew that Hashem would bless them, and they believed Hashem would bless them. And then it was proven that Hashem did. An interesting part about the next part is where it says, you delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, and the many into the hands of the pure, of the few. So that's exactly the point. Again, that Hashem did take the fact that even though they knew they were outnumbered, they knew they had Hashem on their side, and they were delivered that way. And it's very similar to what happened, if you remember, in the 6-day war, when it was really the state of Israel was totally outnumbered. Okay, so we've actually seen a miracle exactly like this happen again in our lifetime, when they were totally outnumbered. Everybody was like on their borders, banking, waiting to attack Israel. And in the meanwhile, Israel managed to do a pre-strike in a way that they actually managed to save everybody first. So the idea of the being delivered, the strong into the hands of the weak and the many into the hands of the pure, started with the idea of Chanukah, but we are reminded that the same thing has happened many, many times. And I mean, even unfortunately, if we think about the Shoah, there were certain situations where that happened, especially a lot of the people that fought against different things happening, and they were very small, but still managed to have some effect. So that's an important thing over there. Now, the next part where you see it says, you deliver the strong into, you deliver, where am I? You deliver the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton into the hands of diligent students of the Torah. So Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch again says that these Tzimamim, if you look at them in Hebrew, the impure, and the Rishaim, the wicked, and the Zaydim, the wanton, were actually not the Greeks themselves that they were referring to. They were talking about Jews who were acting as collaborators to try and assimilate into the Grecian culture, so into the Hellenistic culture. In other words, they were actually the Jews who already had forgotten about Torah and hadn't seen, what was going on. And as a result, they were already starting to assimilate and telling and explaining to other Jews, oh, why this is such a good culture and why we should do this and why this is better than what we've got. And so these are the things that Hashem actually also helped to turn around, was to actually take these people, these Jewish people, and help also turn them around and make them again into the pure, and make them again into not being wicked, and again not being into wanton. In other words, preventing them from assimilating. And that was one of the big motivations why the Kohanim, or the high priests, or the Chashmonaim, decided that they wanted to motivate this and do this at this particular part. Now, the other important part of the miracle is now basically mentioned. And that basically is the fact, obviously, that you made your name holy in the world, because basically you had this great victory and salvation on the very day. But now we get to the last part of the miracle, which is really the second part of the miracle, not just the fighting and the few being over the many, but the second part of the miracle, which is that the children came to the Holy of Holies, and they were able to, and again, this is first an explanation of what they had to do, because remember, they had to first clean the temple, cleanse your temple. Then they had to purify the site for holiness before they could do it. And finally, they were then ready to kindle the lights of Chanukah. And what happened was, obviously with the miracle, we know the oil burned for 8 days. But what again, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, that basically the show of the victory and of everything was really the most important thing, was basically the religious freedom, which was demonstrated by the purification of the temple and the rekindle of the eternal light. So although, yes, there was the victory and the battle and the salvation and all this return to the Jewishness and control of Judea again by the high priests, the important thing really was the fact that it was a spiritual uplifting. Another thing that Rabbi Twersky also adds, that what's very interesting is that when the Maccabees actually found only 1 tin of oil that was supposed to be only sufficient to burn for 1 night, what's very amazing is that again they didn't despair. Again they said, It's lo alecha hamlacha legmor. Again, it's not for us to finish the job, but we can't abstain from trying. And they didn't say, let's wait 8 days until we can finally get pure oil again. They said, no, we're going to do it right now. We're going to clean it up right now. And then everything will be in Hashem's hand, and Hashem will bless us, and Hashem will help us. And so basically, again, they began a task of lighting the menorah. And again, Hashem finished it by letting the candle burn. Okay. Also, Rabbi Twersky says what's really amazing about the story at the end is, again, that if you think of the fact that, and that's the last line, that they established that those 8 days. Okay, they established, meaning that the Chashmonaim and the high priests of the time, they established the 8 days of Chanukah to basically express thanks and to thanks and praise for Hashem's great name. So basically, he says that the oppression of the Syrian Greeks did not actually threaten the physical survival of the Jews at the time. They weren't doing like killing the Jews for not converting or anything like that, like they did in the Inquisition or any of those places. But what they were doing, as I said, is they were trying to affect the spiritual survival and trying, as a result, to push onto them the paganism of Hellenism. So finally, he says, our prayers on Chanukah should always remind us that we should never despair, that we should always know that we should struggle and maintain our devotion to Hashem, and that even against overwhelming pressures from outside, from the society around us, just like they were having there in Judea at the time, we should see that there should be a solution, that we should be able to do something and try to do something and hope and pray that, as we've been promised by Hashem, that He will always help us and that we will survive that situation. Okay, so that's basically my summary on the Al Hanisim prayer. Any questions, anybody? Okay, so now we're going to look at the brachot and the candles section, which is on page, as I mentioned earlier, 782 in the Art Scroll and 897 in the Koran. Okay, so Rav Mank discusses the thing about lighting candles, and he says that you have to light candles in your own home, even though the candles are lit lately in shul between Mincha and Ma'ariv. They do light candles in shul during Mincha and Ma'ariv, and even if you are the Chazan or the Baal Tefillah that's leading the davening and lighting the candles, even if you are saying the bracha and everything in shul, you still should go home and say the bracha at home with your own candles. And you definitely, even if you've seen the candles being lit in shul, you still should go home and light candles at your own house. And that's the reason they do it between Mincha and Ma'ariv, is because you can still get home after Ma'ariv to light your candles, as I mentioned earlier, by the time it gets dark and the stars come out. We also, remember, are going to light the candles with a shamash, and the reason will be explained when we discuss the prayer today of Hainairot Halalu. So now, as Rabbi Sachs explains in his book, and I'm not so sure if it says it in the Art Scroll, but maybe it does, but definitely in Rabbi Sachs's in the Koran, it explains that we are going to light the Chanukah facing us. We're going to put the first candle on the rightmost side of the Chanukah, and that will be the first candle that we will light. And while we are lighting the candles and the candles are burning, we will say before the bracha as soon as we actually light the shamash. Okay, so while we're lighting the candles, we light the shamash, and then we go to the candle and we say the brachot. So as he explains, on the first night, we have to say 3 brachot, and you can see them over there. Okay, so the first one is, well, I'm not going to say the first part, blessed are you. I think you can understand that. Who has sanctified us with His commandments and has commanded us to kindle the Chanukah lights. And the next one is, who has wrought miracles for our forefathers in those days at this season. So it's very strange because you'll notice that that Hebrew, if you look at it in Hebrew, it's still She'asani sim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. So they're still saying bazman hazeh, but they translated it this season, this time. Blessed are you, Hashem, and again, who have kept us alive, sustained, and brought us to the season. So those are the three brachot. So again, if you look at the first one, Rav Monk says, and I'm going to share this with you, that we're saying, it's interesting because we're saying, who has sanctified us with his commandment and has commanded us to kindle his Chanukah light. So just like we say on the Shabbat candles, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, we're saying the same for Chanukah. But clearly there's really no place that Hashem has actually told us to do this. And Rabbi Monk explains that clearly it was given to us by the high priests, who were the ones, as we already just read in the Ala Nisim, that sanctified it and said it will be a day, Chanukah will be a day of celebration. And as a result, I'm going to share with you this verse from Devarim. And as I said, it's chapter 17 in Deuteronomy, and it's verse 10. And it says, you shall carry out the verdict, v'asita al pi hadavar asher yagidu lecha min hamakom hahu asher yivcha Hashem v'shamarta la'asot kachol asher yerucha. So basically it says you shall carry out a verdict that is announced to you from that place that the Lord chose, and observing scrupulously all the instructions to you. So as a result, from there we understand, Rabbi Monk says, that this is something that yes, our rabbis, or I mean, actually in this case, the Kohen HaGadol, the Chashmonaim, they actually are the people who told us to observe this holiday. But it's as if, because they're announcing it in a place or in a situation where, see, min ha'makom hahu, from a place that the Lord chose, which is basically the place where Hashem performed the miracle, and therefore we have to observe very scrupulously all their instructions. And therefore, in the instruction is to say it with the bracha and saying that it was something that they have commanded us to say. Okay. The next one, which basically is the She'asani sim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Again, the people. Rav Monk says that if you actually look at some of the very old liturgy of Tefillah in some of the older prayer books, you'll see that they actually added a vav. It used to say She'asani sim lavotenu bayamim hahem va bazman hazeh. I don't know exactly how the grammar would have been, but anyway, but they would put a vav, and remember, we know whenever we add the vav, I think it's would have been u in this case, but basically it would have been a u. So it would have been u bazman hazeh, because we're saying and bazman hazeh, again referring to and this time, because we again have to always, even when this is happening, and we recognize miracles of the past and of things that Hashem did for our forefathers, we know that Hashem is still doing miracles for us as the Jewish people. And we many of us have lived through many of these miracles and seen them pretty evidently, especially in the state of Israel, and even in other situations in our own private lives of things that have happened to us personally. So we need to recognize that is also and in this time. So not necessarily, as the translation says, at the season, but and in this time. And then obviously, because it is the first time that we're lighting Chanukah candles on the first night, we, of course, say the usual prayer of Shechianu, which we've discussed many times over other holidays and times of the year when we've done the lulav and the etrog, and whenever we eat a fresh fruit for the first time, when you do even a pigeon aben, you say it. But there's many, many times we say that. And again, we thank Hashem again. And it's very interesting the way we thank Hashem. We thank him for keeping us alive and to sustain us and to bring us into the season, okay? Again, we don't take it for granted by just saying, oh, well, thanks for this holiday or something like that, but actually for keeping us alive and for doing all these wonderful things for us, making us aware of these wonderful, fantastic miracles that Hashem does for us all the time that gets us through one day to the next, so that we're able to celebrate the holidays. Okay, after that, Rabbi Sachs explains that on the remainder of the nights, you now start adding one candle to the left of what you put the first night. Every night you add an extra candle to the left, and you make sure that you light this new candle on the left and then continue towards the right afterwards. So basically the new candle is always the one that gets lit. Again, focusing again on the miracle. But therefore, we stop saying the third bracha, because of the fact that it's no longer the first time we're lighting a candle as such, because that's what the Shechiana was for. But we do continue about saying the second bracha, because we're not just lighting candles anymore. We are still reminding ourselves about the miracle. And by lighting the new candle, that's the miracle that the candle burned in an extra day, remember? And so every day that we light that new candle is a reminder that that oil burned for one extra day and one longer day. Okay, is that good? And that was the basic for the brachot of the kindling of the candles. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next prayer, which is the Hanerot Halalu. And that is, again, if somebody wants to read. Okay, Cherna, go ahead. English.
I lost my sound for a while.
Okay, 783.
Yes. These lights we kindle upon the miracles, the wonders, the salvations, and the battles which you performed for our forefathers in those days at this season through your holy priests. During all 8 days of Chanukah, these lights are sacred, and we are not permitted to make ordinary use of them, but to look at them in order to express thanks and praise to your great name for your miracles, your wonders, and your salvations.
Okay, so again, this hymn is sung as soon as you start lighting, the first candle is burning, okay? So basically you say the brachot and then you're lighting the first candle, whatever the first candle, okay, the first night it's only one candle, but obviously as you go on. So you basically start singing the hymn as soon as you light the first candle. Rabbi Sachs explains that it must be sung immediately after one candle has been lit, and that's important. The other thing he explains that if you look at the hymn, it basically is talking about why we light the candles again, which is similar to what we already were reading in Al Anisim. And secondly, the holiness of the lights, the fact that they're holy. And finally, the fact that we're also praising and giving praise to Hashem like we normally do when we do sing a hymn or a prayer to Hashem. So that's really the purpose, the three purposes of saying this particular prayer. If you look at the first words of in the Hebrew, okay, of Hanerot Halalu. Okay, now I'm not 100% sure why he does this, but Rav Monk says that if you look at the letters of Neirot Halalu, basically, I guess you leave out the hey because it's the word the, it's like a consonant, not really the word. But if you count the letters Nun, Reish, Vav, Tav, and the hey, Lamed, Lamed, Vav, in other words, you get 8, right? So Nun, Reish, Vav, Tav, and hey, Lamed, Lamed, Vav, you get 8 letters, right? And therefore, that is an allusion to the 8 festive days of Chanukah. And therefore, those particular words are actually just the introduction telling you that the 8 days of Chanukah are coming and what is going to happen and what happened on those 8 days. And then, as you notice, we continue now to list again the reasons of what Hashem did. And basically, we talk about, first of all, the miracles. And miracles can also be seen as signs. In other words, we talk about the signs that we see and that we should look for signs and definitely look for ways to notice Hashem. And wonders are actually considered as extraordinary occurrences, things that happen and that you would say, well, why did that happen? And salvation, again, remember we talk about here, as we mentioned in Ala Nisim, as a spiritual revival, okay, not so much as a salvation from the armies and the battles. But then, of course, we talk about the battles and the victories because of the fact that there was a war, and the Maccabees did defeat the Greek army, which was very mighty and much stronger than them. But with Hashem's help, they managed to do that. So that's the first part. So this next part, as we discussed, is going to discuss the fact that the candles are holy. Okay, and basically it refers to the fact that the candles are holy, and you may not use them for light or to light the other candles. So just like well, it's not like on Shabbat. On Shabbat, you're allowed to light the candles. In fact, you light the candles in the place where you're eating on purpose because of the fact you want to use the light of the candles to enjoy your meal. And it's one of the reasons why you light the candles in your dining area and near your dining area, so that you can enjoy the candles and you benefit from the light of the candles. We do not do this on Chanukah because of the fact that the candles are holy, and the fact that the candles, as I've mentioned many times now, have a spiritual meaning and not a physical meaning. So therefore, the light is not what's important. It's the fact that the candles burnt on and on and on, and that we kept adding more and more candles. So another reason why we use a shamash is because the shamash is allowed to be used as an extra candle. So that's why there's that 9th candle. We use the shamash to light the candles, and we're not allowed to light one candle from another candle. And even if your shamash would say burn out, you would have to still light another shamash and then use that shamash to light the other candles if you were in the process of lighting the candles. And the other important thing, actually, which I only really saw this for the first time, is I never knew this before, so maybe some of you did, but I didn't. The shamash actually is always higher in a Chanukah. For a Chanukah to be kosher, I always knew that you had to have all the candles have to be on the same level. That has to be for sure, okay? But the other thing that's important is the shamash does have to be higher. And the reason why the shamash does have to be higher is because if you know anything about the way light spreads, the highest candle is actually the one that will spread the most light. And if there is any light that the Chanukah is emitting, then it's as if the shamash is actually spreading the lights of the Chanukah and not the actual other candles that are spreading the light. So that's one of the reasons why we do put the shamash, and we should burn the shamash actually all the way through the process. So because some people I have seen people who use the shamash to light candles and then sort of blow it out. That's not one of the things you should do. The shamash candle must also burn with all the others and must be higher than that. Okay, now Rabbi Twersky again explains that from this prayer, we are celebrating the miracle of Chanukah in a spiritual way, because of the fact that we are saved from spiritual destruction. So therefore, Chanukah underscores the mission, one of the missions of Judaism, which is to bring the light of Hashem to the world, or basically the Or Lagoyim, okay, as it says in Yeshayahu chapter 49:6, which we've quoted before, that Hashem is actually these kinds, and that's why these lights of Chanukah, they represent a holiness and a spiritualness of the fact that there was a triumph of the Torah over Hellenism. And so when we can use the light, we are actually using the light rather for spiritual reasons and not for physical reasons. And that is why we're not allowed to use the light at all for any benefit to see anything. And that's one of the reasons you don't actually put off the lights in your house, like when you light your Chanukah candles. Like, some people like to do that if it's like, dynamic. They think it'll look better when you light the candles, because again, that's not the purpose for the candles to give light. The purpose of the candles is for you to notice that you're using these candles as a spiritual vehicle. If you look at the end of this tefillah, you'll see that it ends with again that we look at the candles and we use them to express thanks and praise to you, our name of Hashem, our miracles, for your wonders and your salvations. So again, there is a custom that as a result of this, we do what's called Persum HaMitzvah, which is to publicize the mitzvah. And as a result, it's one of the reasons that why the custom of lighting candles in shul became established, because when during times of persecution, it wasn't possible for Jews actually to put their candles either by their windows or outside. Sometimes people put it outside on their balconies or stuff, I guess, in places where maybe the weather wasn't so harsh and would blow the candles out or something like that. But they couldn't do that anymore. And I think that's, and I guess I'm sure that's one of the reasons why Chabad now makes sure they light so many public Chanukahs and stuff and light candles. But in those days, that's when they started doing it that way, because again, you have to publicize the mitzvah. Similarly, if you live in a place where you can't really put your candles near a window, like if you live high up and no one would really walk by and see the candles, like in an apartment building, maybe on the 20th floor or something like that. I don't know. I'm on the 12th floor, but I won't be here for Chanukah, so we'll see it. But then they say that you should put it actually by the left door, the left side of your door. So your mezuzah is on your right door and your Chanukah is on the left door of the room that you walk in the most common, and the most people in the house will walk past, or you will walk past during the time to remind you of the Chanukah lights. Rav Monk also says that if you think of when the candles are burning, you should actually focus the entire time while the candles are burning on the candles and on celebrating the holiday. Now, I know Chanukah is not really a time when we don't do malacha and we don't do work, but there are lots of customs as to why you shouldn't do work, at least during the time while the candles are burning. And one of the customs is specifically even directed at women, which could be quite interesting, because women tend to be either cooking dinner or serving dinner or cleaning up after dinner instead of actually being with their family and stuff on the Chanukah. So it's actually, I guess you should be trying to get everything organized before you light the candles, and being ready to actually sit with your family and enjoy the joys of Chanukah, of eating latkes and playing dreidel and all these other things, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the idea comes from actually, again, it comes from actually, what's his name? Mattityahu's daughter, her name was Yehudit. Okay, not Mattityahu, sorry, Yochanan's daughter. Her name was Yehudit. Okay, so in other words, she's Mattityahu's sister, who basically, when the Greeks were trying to go in and convert the Jews and to try and get them influence and try and make them suffer, they were trying to cut off supplies of food and stuff like that. And she told her father that she's going to go to the king, and she's going to go and be with him, and tell him that she's going to pretend that she's a source of information of how badly everybody's doing there. And as a result, the king, well, first of all, was attracted to her physically, and secondly, he thought she was beautiful. And so her and her handmaid sort of got free reign of going to visit him and everything. And on the third night, when she finally said that, oh, she thinks now that they're going to be ready for attack and whatever, and for the Greeks to take over, he said to her, well, then you need to come by yourself without your handmaid, and I'm going to organize all food and a party. And she said, no, I've got my own food. And she bought him all these cheeses and wines and stuff, and she fed him all the stuff. And as a result, he got very thirsty from eating the salty cheeses and from drinking the lots of bottles of wine, and eventually he fell asleep. And actually, she then decided that she was going to be like previous heroines in the Bible, and she was like Devorah, and she was going to chop off his head. And she went and took his sword and chopped off his head, and actually walked out with his head and showed everybody back at home that this is what she'd done in Jerusalem. And as a result, people were very, very, to hold out against the Greeks again. And as a result, that's when the Mattityahu brother and everybody decided to do the uprising. And so that's why women particularly should know that they had a very important part in this miracle and should therefore do that. However, also Rabbi Monk says, if you look at the word Chanukah itself, the Hebrew letters, Chet, Nun, and the Vav, or the U, okay, they are the word Chanu, And if you translate the word chanu, it translates into basically rested or parked yourself down. Okay, and so basically, or placed yourself down or camped down. That's basically lots of the translations. So in other words, what you should do, and then if you have a look, sorry, the kaf, I forgot about the kaf and the hay from Chanukah. The kaf and the hay from Chanukah, kaf stands for 20, hay stands for 5, and together 20 plus 5 makes 25, and that's 25th of Kislev. So again, Rav Monk says, at least on the first night of Chanukah, which is the 25th of Kislev, you should actually rest and partake and do that. And as a result, also, if you look at another root of the Shores of Chanukah, it also comes from the Hebrew word. The Shores is Chaf, Nun, and Chaf, Nun, and Kaf, which comes from, it makes the Hebrew word of Chinuch. And Chinuch is education. And that is why it's said that even men and women, everybody should sit with their children at this time and do fun things like play dreidel and eat latkes and tell stories about Chanukah and educate the children about the miracle of Chanukah. So it's important during at least the time when the candles are burning to do this. And that's what the prayer is teaching us. By actually saying that we also should express thanks and praise at the end of the prayer for your great name and for your miracles. That we shouldn't, it's not just the lighting of the candles, realizing that they're special and they're Kodesh and everything like that, but also using that time of the candle lighting to actually praise and thank Hashem and to take off time to do this. And they even say that it should be the men too should take off time from Torah study to do this. Okay, I'm going to end off now because I know it's the rabbi's class in less than 5 minutes, just about. But I just want to add one final note to you to remind you that starting on December the 5th, okay, which is on Shabbat, well, actually Friday night will be actually on December the 5th for Ma'ariv. You will add in the service V'tein tal u'mata livracha, which is on page. If you look on page 270 in the art scroll in the Ma'ariv service, and also it's in the Shacharit and in the Mincha service as well during the week. And you will add it V'tein bracha, V'tein tal u'mata livracha, and give dew and rain for blessing until Pesach. Okay, remember we spoke about this before when we were actually going over the Amida. At the moment, we've been saying V'tein bracha and give blessing, which is just and give blessings. This is in the section of the Amida, the 9th bracha of the Shmona Esrei, where we talk about the Birchat Hashanim, the year of prosperity. But now, because Israel needs the rain and the dew, because this is the time of the year that Israel needs it, we start saying this and we continue saying this until Pesach. So it's a little addition to already saying Morid Hatal, Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGashem, which we started at Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret, but now we are carrying on basically by adding it now in the middle of the winter, which is the important part to add that as well. So that's December the 5th is the change. And the reason December the 5th this year is because of the fact it's a leap year in the English calendar, okay? And we all know it's got to do with the winter equinox or something like that, I think. Not so good in geography. All right, so I'm going to go and remind you about the rabbi's shir straight after this again on the Dvar Torah, the Parsha, and I'll see you again next week from a very chilly New York. Bye.
Sheryl, can I say a word to you?
Yes, sure.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to apologize. You said hello, and I disappeared because I was having trouble getting on.
Okay.
And I lost my sound later, so I don't know if you asked me to read or whatever, and I wasn't there, so that's why
Okay, all right.
I cord.
Okay.
So.
All right, and I'm going to reply to your email about last night.
Also, Sheryl, I had a hard time getting on, and somebody else said, I think it was Charna said that she also, it took me to like a bingo or something from the show. So you might want to check on that.
Oh, okay. I must admit, I didn't use today's link because I couldn't actually find it. So I used my usual link
Well,
and just
it was good because it came up right away today, but the link, at least for your class, I don't know about for my husband's also, whether, you know, it doesn't, and then I had to put the password in. Charna, did you also have to put the password in?
Yes,
It's
yes.
supposed to be automatic when you touch
Right.
it. And
Yes,
it
I'll
wasn't.
email it, Andrea, and tell her.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Be well. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good Shabbos.